Um, so with that, call this House to order. Call on the Prime Minister to give a speech not to exceed 7 minutes with 30 seconds of grace. Here.
Okay, so if everybody's ready, the order of the speech is going to be top of case characterization, framework, secondly on three contentions from side government. My time starts in three, two, one. Super proud to propose the motion that this House, as Marty McFly, would use the DeLorean to visit your future rather than the past. So the info slide is you are Marty McFly, a high school student who has just traveled back to 1955 in Doc Brown's time traveling DeLorean. After returning to your present day, Doc offers you one more trip before retiring the machine for good. So firstly, let's talk about like what does this world look like? Probably visiting and using the time machine is just being able to go to the past or go to the future and maybe be able to like alter little to nothing because nothing in the motion suggests that you can make like tangible world change like massive world changes in the motion and it probably would be a bad idea anyways because if you try to change something like massively in the past or the future it'd be like incredibly unpredictable. So, and also I just want to make a difference. It's just like,
Yoshi,
go ahead.
sorry, could you just define a little bit more of what you like define as a massive change?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Um, should I do that off time? I can do it on time, actually.
Um,
Yeah. So, oh, yeah.
wait, no, sorry. I was just saying you could do it off time, but it doesn't really
Oh,
matter.
okay, okay. I was just gonna say like to me a massive change is like being there for a long time, like months or years and trying to like alter like a large event. For example, like preventing a world like a war from happening is probably not gonna happen, or like discovering like a disease and like making sure it never occurs in the first place. I think those are like a bit unrealistic for this motion. I'll resume my time at 53 in three, two, one. Also, the motion makes it very clear that it's visiting your own future or the past, right? So you just went back to 1955, so it's your future or the past is the decision you're about to make. How much do you know about the past or the future where you go? I think that you probably know little to nothing about past or your future because you're kind of making the split second decision, right? Doc is offering you one more chance before he retires the machine for good. There's not much time to be like, hold on, give me a few months to study what I want to do or like about a certain thing I want to go to. More likely it's kind of like a closer to split second decision that you're about to make. And you don't there's not going to be an ominous voice who's going to give you like a preview of what the world is like when you go to the past or the future. I think that's pretty intuitive. You're just going to have to feel it out. And how long you'll be there, like I said earlier, to be realistic and to be as close to the interpretation of the motion as possible, I feel as if that it's best to say that you're probably not going to be there for like more than like a couple weeks, like probably a few days, um, and something like that, not like a couple months or years or decades. And I would say like the weighing mechanism to evaluate this round should be net benefits for Marty McFly because people are self-interested. He can and it's mainly about his decision and what's going to be best for him. I think that's pretty reasonable. If there's no questions on top of case, I'm going to move on to my first contention, which is on influence. Like, so firstly, you're like Marty McFly. I'm just gonna say like you, right? Use that pronoun. So you're more likely to have more like control over your future because it's narrowed down to the scope of like your circle, your city, and your life, rather than the general past, which is so incredibly wide, right? You just went back to 1955. So in like in the US, maybe that was like a time of like right past like World War II or like time like where like it started to have like an economic boom. But like you have little to probably no knowledge about like the grand scheme of things. So if you just like randomly pick like 1863, you're probably not going to know what's going on. Or if you pick like a large event, you probably don't know like the exact situation of what you're entering. But in general, no one is like hyper attentive to history. Like this person is like an average. Marty McFly sounds like an average individual probably who does not have like specific information about an event that will make like that will help him make a really big difference. An opposite might say like, oh, like in their next piece, like, oh, going to the past could make you allow you to do so many like amazing things, but in reality you'll have little to no control over like very significant things that will actually make a net benefit to other people's lives too, if that matters to you, because like very massive things or events such as like wars or conflicts or discovery of like drugs or medicine, that is all like coming from like bits and bits of progress that happen over time. It's not going to be changed once you go to the past for like a few weeks or a few months. Okay, so what is the impact then? In Gov's world, you have significant influence on your life, which is a common desire that people have, right? We like there is like this kind of consensus that humans have, like, oh, like I lack control over my own life. I wish that I could control this. I wish I could control that. That is what you get on Gov's side of the house. You have immense influence over what you can like see in your future. And I'll talk about the benefits of that in my second contention. Second contention then is on breadth of experiences and fulfillment. We see in the info slide that you've already been to the past, right? You've always like probably is a desire to see what's going on in the past, but you have already fulfilled that desire. And like I like said, like that time frame is if Marty McFly is probably from America, like it was probably like post like World War II with like an economic boom. It's probably like a relatively good time, but now it's time to go in the future. Why is this so? Because you'll have a much more fulfilling experience because you'll be able to see differences in like political landscape, climate change, and your personal life that no one has. Because for example, all of us debaters are here to talk about like debate about things and predict about the future, right? But no one really has been into the future to see those things. But historians and people in the present have over like analyzed and overanalyzed like what has happened in the past over and over again. So we have a good knowledge of those things. So what you get uniquely on government's world is that you'll have a bigger picture that will like allow you to have more fulfillment and more utility, knowing that maybe that you're the only one who knew about like this thing in the future that you can control in your life, but also that you've been both in the past and the future, so you don't have any regrets. So you'll have more context of the future with information already from the past, helping you to make better life decisions for yourself. So for example, if you see yourself in a like a certain vision, you have this aspiration that you want to achieve, you're more likely to work harder to achieve that or try to change things in the present to match the perception of you have yourself or not match the perception of you have of yourself in the future. Okay, third contention is on regret. Let's talk about like human desires because I think that's a lot of things that people tie together when they talk about traveling the past or the like or the future. Almost everyone has a desire to leave a legacy or like feel important in the world. Why is this so, right? So I have four reasons for you. Firstly, you have a societal pressure to be impactful. People are all like all of us are like high school students. They're all like including Marty McFly, constantly being told you need to make an impact. Like where's your nonprofit? Like it's time to do that. It's time to make an impact and like positively influence people around you, right? There's also a glorification of philanthropy where you need to be like you should be a good person, do good things. A lot of people also have existential dread about whether or not they'll be remembered in the grand scheme of the universe. Also, like high schoolers are known to have a lot of self-doubt and wonders about the future because it's a pivotal moment of their life that is probably also shared by Marty McFly. So if you don't go, you're almost certainly going to regret your decision. And when you step into the like when you don't like step into the like when you actually face the future, like not time traveling, but like time passes, you'll probably have a lot of guilt about whether or not you could have changed certain circumstances, predicting like something could happen in advance. Like, for example, made the most of the time with a loved one when they were not there for you, like when they weren't there for you in the like later future. What are the impacts? You're gonna have horrible mental health no matter how successful you'll be, because people once they like have something, they'll always want more, right? You'll always wonder what could have happened if you did a certain thing earlier, pursued a passion you had, and you'll never be happy. Also, uniquely because you're probably not going to share this with other people because people are either going to judge you for what you should have, could have done, or if you share, like no one's probably going to believe you. Like if I said that today, no one would believe me. So for all those reasons, couldn't be prouder to propose.
I think that speak of those eloquent remarks and call upon the leader of opposition to give a speech not to exceed 8 minutes with 30 seconds of grace here.
Okay, awesome speech. Let me just set up my timer really quickly. Okay, speak now if you're not ready. Otherwise, my time will start on my first word. Okay, hi judges, my name is Melody. I'm going to be the first opposition speaker on this motion. I'm going to go top of case on both gov and op side, go op case, and then gov case. So starting off with addressing some of gov's top of case, we agree with like this house frameworks. We agree with most of the framing that they give here with like the massive change and stuff. But they also talk about how it's like it's visiting your own future versus the past in general. We don't think that's true. We think it's probably implied that Doc is going to let you visit your future and your past, not necessarily just your own future and the past in general. But that's just a specific thing for some of our points. We don't think it's going to be that, important overall. But they also talk about how like this is a pretty split second decisions very quick. We just don't think there's like enough warranting here, right? It's probably unlikely that Doc is just going to decline you of this opportunity entirely just because you don't make a decision on the spot, right? Like there's this huge time travel machine. Like I think Doc understands if like it's his time travel machines, he understands to some sense of how time travel works, of how you may want to, think about it a little bit. Sure, obviously you're not going to have months to deliberate, but we don't think it's going to be a split second decision. You're going to have at least a little bit of time to think about this, right? Um, so going into our top of case, a few extra things of
POC
framing we
stop
want to do.
time. What do you,
Yeah,
sorry, POC stop time. What do you like qualify as like a short time to deliberate?
a few days at best.
Okay, thank you.
So up to a few days. Okay, continuing my time in 3, 2, 1. Just to add a few things onto our framing here, we want to mention that your future can be good or bad. It's not going to be necessarily either of the two, and both are very possible. And also saying you're going to visit implies that you are coming back. We agree with that. We think it's probably going to be a few days. And then I also want to frame how we are a high school student, right? We're not the most mature person on the planet. We're not making the most rational decisions, right? Sure, we are probably not the most immature, but we are still going through things like puberty. Our like head is not completely developed yet. And a lot of teenagers at this time are going to be able to make like rash decisions that they might not make as an adult. Okay, going into our contentions, our first contention is about the burden of knowledge, right? First subpoint here is that if you travel forward and the future you see is bad, right? What's going to happen is that you're going to probably obsess over this future, right? You're going to constantly be thinking about it because not only are you A, time traveling, which very, very few people probably ever do, but B, it's something inherently negative to you. You don't want negative things to happen to you. I think this is pretty obvious. So you're going to obsess over it. This is going to ultimately be bad for your mental health, right? It can also lead to potential reckless decision making, right? Because you're trying to fix your certain problem, right? If you see that like, oh, maybe you're in college or something, or you're just looking at your like college future, and then this girl breaks up with you and you're really upset, right? You might try your best to do things to try to prevent that, but we see that can be a very reckless decision because any impact you make on the future can very blow up like a butterfly effect, right? It could potentially worsen your future situation as it is because you don't have enough context to actually make good decisions. Impacts here, like I just said, it can potentially worsen your future situation. It can also lead to things like worsen mental health because you have like crippling anxiety because you're constantly thinking about this, or lead to things like obsession. We think that's overall not good for Marty or us. Second subpoint here is if you go to the future and you see that your future is good, right? What happens is that you're holding yourself to like a certain standard, right? So there's chances are that you're going to see your future as good, and then you just know good things that are happening to you when they come, right? What is this going to mean? It's going to be a lot of pressure on you because you're almost sort of like living on a script at that point because you're going to be able to good things that come to you are already going to be seen to you. So the joy and happiness of experiencing certain things, that agency that you have, is just going to be taken away from you, right? Impact here again. There's a lack of surprise and joy on this side, right? There's also also important moments are going to be stolen. So summary here, no matter what you see, knowing your future will be prematurely stressful in both worlds here, and you're going to have something taken away from you in both worlds, making you unfulfilled. Our contention 2 here is about there's a loss of motivation. First subpoint again is about if you see a good future, right? Let's say that you see a good future. What is this going to mean? Because you're a high school student, you're an average high school student, you're like, I don't know, you probably just let's just say you're an average student. You're not like the very worst or the very best student, right? What this means is that because you're a teenager, if you see that you already are content in the future, you already have this good future laid out for you, it's going to create a sense of comfort for you. What this is going to do, it can cause you to stop actually trying or working as hard because you see your future, your good future already there. And why? And Gov tries to actually tell you in their speech that this is not true, how like, oh, like they're just going to try to work harder. But we think that that's not how a normal like high schooler is going to think of it probably. If you see in the future that you are living a good life, you're probably not going to want to continue to work even harder than you already are. Probably not. You're probably going to be like, oh, I'm fine where I am. We see there's a lack of motivation in this world, and your future might become much less unlikely when you don't continue working hard because you see comfort in that life. Second subpoint under this contention is if you have a bad future, right? What this does is that it can be seen as really you can be really demotivated, right? Especially as a high school student. Failure to you at the time can mean like a lot of things because it's probably one of the first times you're experiencing like genuine big failure, genuine big loss in your life, right? You can feel hopeless that you failed, and that's like a very, very probable situation that happens, right? What does this lead to? There's a lack of motivation. There's no motivation. It's overall going to be worse for your mental health. But also this makes this like negative future much more unlikely because you already see that it's going to be bad. It's a very small percentage that this high school student who is prone to like feeling awful about things and like having mood swings and making rash decisions and having, rash thoughts. It's very unlikely that this high school student is going to then suddenly get a surge to work this much harder instead of just accepting that they have this worse life. And again, the impact here, there's going to be a worsened outlook on life, worsened impact on the person. Contention 3 here is about misinterpretation. So things need context, right? If you see something bad happen in the future, chances are that you might try to change your own future, right? Because you're a high school student, you want your future to be good, right? But again, many situations have certain context not understandable at a first glance, or even, with a few days of being there, right? Trying to fix something you don't fully understand all the process of like having been done is not something that's good because you can act on bad decisions or incomplete information. And again, you probably will because you're a high school student, and because you will probably act on rash decisions. What is this going to lead to? It's going to probably like remove a lot of good outcomes that might come later in your life because you're trying so hard to fix something when you don't know the full like you don't know the full context, you don't know the full consequences of what you're doing, so you're just making a rash decision at the moment that can potentially worsen your future. And then last contention here is about benefits of visiting the past, right? First subpoint is that your acts, and this is kind of a clash I'll talk about later, or maybe my partner will talk about later, but your actions are much more likely to lead to results. Because you know about our past, or even just the past in general, there's a higher possibility that we can change something intentionally instead of accidentally, right? Whereas in the future, it's super unpredictable. The future, a lot of things are able to adapt very quickly, and you don't know what you can change. Whereas the past, if you want to tell someone something, you want to do something, you can have control there. And this is the second subpoint under this. Control, right? Key difference is that when you time travel forward, you see your older self's like life firsthand, or you see life at firsthand. You can control what you do and what you say, whereas in the future, you don't know what you are impacting. You don't know what you could possibly be affecting. While in the past, it's much more likely you get the intended consequence that you want. Going on to contention, the Gov's contentions, my partner will finish if I cannot. Their first one is about influence. Um, we want to say that again. We see that this is not true. Look at our subpoint under contention 4 about how you can probably influence more, at least influence more controlledly in the past, but also being able to influence more is not always a good thing because you're in the future. It's uncertain. You don't know what you're going to be able to influence. We see that this is ultimately not a good risk to take. And I ran out of time, so I urge you to vote in off ballot. Thank you.
I think that Speaker plus eloquent remarks can call upon the member of government to give a speech not to exceed 8 minutes with 30 seconds of grace. Here.
Okay, so the order is going to go top of case again, and then reputations to op, and then moving back to gov. My time starts in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I accept like I concede this idea that it's like like it can include your like in your it can include your past, and like you'll probably have a few days. I think that's very reasonable, and that your future can be a good or bad. What I have a problem with is like this characterization of like a high school student. I think it's blown a little bit out of proportion in the analysis that like that LO gives you. LO tells you that like high school students are like insanely like going through puberty, like having the worst time ever and not going to make a rash decision whatsoever. I think that like you can take into account that maybe this might be not the most mature actor without like accepting all of these like exaggerations of how this person is going to make like a worse like a horrible decision like with a split second. Like if we can accept the narrative that this is like a high schooler that got in like is a high schooler who was able to travel in the past and like come back just fine, or just like intuitively understand that not every raging like average high schooler, maybe Gen Alpha, but I think like as a current like high school student, they're not going to go like completely nuts. I think that's kind of important to take into consideration. Now, moving on to some responses to Op's case. Firstly, on burden and knowledge. They say like they give you like two paths of like whether it'll be good or bad. They say like if you if there's something bad about your life, you're going to like make a reckless decision trying to fix your problem, and it could blow up in your face, right? So firstly, I want to cross apply this impact of like anxiety obsession. I think it's much higher on like op side of the house, which I'll analyze a little bit later. But like I think if you see a bad future, or you're more like, even if you try to change it, it is not going to create something that's gonna like like I feel that it's not going to like ruin your life. Like if you try to like something goes bad and you see like that future and you have like a few days to change it, maybe you're gonna try to learn more about it and like try to fix it. And even if it like blows up on your face, I don't think it's to the proportion that like op is trying to tell you, because of what I say about like how you're probably self-interested, you're trying to make like a good decision for yourself. And then like I on the idea like if it like, is a good situation for yourself, they say like, oh, you're living on a script and joy and happiness will be like taken away. I think this is completely untrue. Why is this so? Well, you have a few days in the future, right? You like they are acting like the opposing team is saying that acting like every important milestone of your life will be taken away for you, and those big moments will no longer bring you utility anymore. I think that's completely not true. I think that maybe you have one or two like important moments. Like I doubt that like statistically you'll just land on your wedding and then you'll like not be like you'll like not be happy anymore. And even if something like even if you don't buy the argument, even if something massively good happens to you, if I win $1 million, I'm gonna be real happy knowing about it like earlier anyways and plan how to use it. I don't think I'm going to be suddenly very, very upset. Now, moving on to the second contention on like loss of motivation. I think that like if we can like I can maybe concede to some arguments about how like you might not suddenly like grind 24/7 if you you have a sense of comfort of like seeing a good future, or a little bit of like fear with a bad future, but you're probably not going to suddenly, like op says, bum around and just do nothing and like fall flat. I think probably you're going to make an effort to like if what is true, like the whole point of going to the past or future is to try to change something, you're probably going to somehow like try to change something. Maybe that's not in the way like blown out of proportion, like you're gonna grind 24/7, never sleep, or like suddenly just give up on life, but you're probably going to have a net benefit because you're probably going to see that, oh, my future is good, I better like continue to working hard or continue to doing what I'm doing. Or if my future is bad, like if I don't want to live that future and I had the privilege to go see it, it's probably time to like change something. And then misinterpretation, like I think if you are misinterpreting something that's happening, that's a possibility like with the few days you have, but I think something you misinterpret in a few days is not going to dramatically change your life in a big way. And if what op says is true, that you're not going to do anything like dramatically different with the information you get, you're not going to suddenly ruin life. They can't simultaneously say that all the potential benefits are minimal at best and all the negative harms are like maximum. And then on like I want to point out that like most of these things are like defensive. Like op has a burden to prove like I believe that they have to have like a net benefit, because if everything washes out, then panel you should vote on like bit of net utility for side government. Now on this idea of like benefits of visiting the past, I don't think that there's like a high possibility that you can change something intentionally. Like if we're looking at the scope of one life, like how many people remember like one specific thing in the past that they want to change, or something that's going to be so pivotal like for their life. Like even if somebody has that, Marty McFly has that thing, I think if going in the future you're probably like going to see a breakup, then going to the past, I don't think you're going to see anything that's going to dramatically change your life for the better. And I think that like if high schoolers aren't making the smartest decisions, maybe Marty McFly isn't going to make the best decision looking in the past and soaking in regret of the past, and instead he would be better off looking into the future for something, for new information and for like more optimism. And I think like this idea like that like something that there's a higher possibility that you can be like especially intentional or change something like so much better lacks warranting. But I'm going to go on to some like to re emphasize some of the things on our case and do some weighing. So they're just the response of the first contention is just like, oh, more influence is not a good thing. But I would say more influence is a good thing because of all the analysis I gave you about how people often feel powerless. So when you are able to take control, that's probably better for your mental health, being able to take control of your own life and make some change. And even if you make like the not perfect decision, you'll live with more happiness knowing that, hey, at least I tried to do it in the future, right? I didn't go to the past again after I went to the past already. And I think that like counterfactual is just that you're going to like try to go to the past and change something that you knew happened already. Like if you can internalize, maybe it's easier if I change something in the past and it still doesn't work. Think about how much harder that's gonna feel on yourself and how bad. Like, oh, I went like I could have went to the future, but I went to the past to change like make amends with XYZ friend and it still did nothing. So that's probably going to be worse for yourself. And then I want to extend the two arguments on like breadth of experiences and fulfillment. You're probably going to be much more fulfilled with context with your life. Like more information is also better. Like they neglect to talk about like these important things, right? Right now we're in a time where the political landscape, like the risk of climate change and like contemplation about your personal life is probably hovering over Marty McFly. To be able to have more information and contemplate those things, I don't think it's going to create a burden of information. I think it's going to be relief. And lastly, on regret, I think none of it's like interacted with it, but just like use this to say, like, I would cross apply this to show why, even if you buy that a high schooler is kind of going through puberty, that they still have a lot of motivation to be able to do good things in life because of societal pressure to be impactful, because of the glorification of philanthropy, existential dread. All of these things are going to propel you forward, not hold you back. So at the end of the day, you should vote for government because you'll be able to access a better future for yourself and better mental health for all those reasons I propose.
Think that speaker for those eloquent remarks and call upon the member of opposition to a speech not to exceed 8 minutes, 30 seconds of grace. You're here.
Okay, sorry, let me just set up my timer real quick. Okay. I'm not gonna do an off-time roadmap. I'm just gonna hop right into the case. Okay. To start, I'm gonna start on our side and then I'm gonna go to their side. Top of case, there was mostly agreement between like the idea that you're acting basically in effectiveness and self-interest, like benefits for yourself. Um, House is defined, but they said like some of our points are a little bit reliant on the fact that you are a high school student, and they say, oh, they're a high school student, like they're mature and they're not going to go nuts, like, and things like that. But I want to say, like, I want to say, like, in high school, as government side, like, brought up, like you're under a lot of pressure to like succeed in college and things like this. So I'm gonna say that maybe they're not, if they see their future, they're not gonna be in like the fully correct mental state. I mean, this is gonna make more sense when we get into our points, but they're not gonna be a fully reasonable actor, especially because of all this pressure and all this stress. But they're just much more likely to make rash decisions than an adult. Okay. Contention one, burden of knowledge. Um, they said that it's much like more likely. Oh, they basically said that we're basically like blowing this out of proportion. Um, we didn't say that like it was the end of the world if you do get this burn of knowledge, but if something happens, it's probably not good for your future. Like there are major events that you would struggle to cope with. Um, Maybe it's not like the world is ending or something, but personal things, like maybe one of your grandparents dies. And as if we buy what Gov says, like you live there for like a few days, maybe living in a world without them for a few days, depending on like how close you are, is going to have some pretty strong emotional impacts, especially if like maybe you see yourself dealing with it poorly, etc. So, um, and then they also said on our burden of knowledge point, if you see yourself in a good situation, you're probably not going to see yourself in that many like influential situations in your life. Um, but I would say that this burden of knowledge is still important, even if you teleport to a time like, say, like you're in college, but you're at like Harvard or something. Now you're going to basically be living like that's like your dream or something. You're going to be holding yourself to that standard, and you're gonna be like living your life as like a script of like what your other self did, and it's putting a lot of pressure on you because if this is like your dream goal in life and you see yourself accomplishing it, sure that maybe that's fulfilling, but now you're going to be stressed. You basically have to live up to that achievement. Um, and additionally, this is going to provide like a lack of like surprise and joy. Like, if you maybe if like you do get into Harvard or something, I don't really know. But if something happens and now you know it's going to happen beforehand, there's a lot of things in which that kind of takes away from like the fun of it. Um, okay. Okay, their contention too on like the loss of motivation. This is very similar to our contention one. So I think a lot of like the rebuttals, um, are gonna flow through. I think. like you will be demotivated as a high school student. Like maybe you don't get into like the right college. I don't know. Either way, it's just like an insane amount of like stress, pressure. Like on average, you're probably like 16 years old, and you're holding yourself to either such a like to a high standard of either achieving your goals or trying to repeat the future, going back, changing like your life, like your timeline.
Feel
So I
that.
think fundamentally, I can answer it at the end. Um, yeah, okay. Contention three, misinterpretation. They basically said that there's like not that many events that are going to be like that dramatic in the course of your life. Like maybe like we both kind of conceded that we can't change a world war or something. Like we're not focusing on those, but there are things that are dramatic in the course of life. Maybe there's some events that happened, like you broke up with someone, as we mentioned, and you're a high school student, like maybe you realize down the line that your current girlfriend, like you broke up with them. You're gonna you probably don't have a full grasp of why that was either currently or in the future. So you might be trying to make some pretty rash decisions that could backfire on you. I just think this whole idea of seeing yourself in the future is pretty bad. Um, and then you might be asking, like, why isn't this non-unique? Like, because for both sides, oh, like if a family member dies, you can go back and tell them to spend more time with it. A lot of these points are a wash. But I want to bring up a point that we kind of brought up in our first speech, but I would like to really highlight in our second speech is control. So the key difference is that when you time travel forward, you're going to see your older self's life firsthand. You're the younger self, like your older self, current self is a younger version of you in that scenario. The younger version, which is going to be your current self, is going to see their person's life firsthand. The older self can't withhold any information. If something's tragic and they think maybe it wouldn't be good for you to know, they can't withhold that. Like if you go into like your family's house and like you see that like oh like there's like a funeral picture of your mom or something, like your older self, it doesn't have the capability to withhold that knowledge from you, and you can see a lot of harmful things. We're on side government, you're going into your younger or on side opposition, you're going into your younger person's life. They're not seeing your world. And as thus, you can kind of like you don't have to say, oh, by the way, like your mom died, if it would be potentially harmful because they're not as mature. So I think this is the clear distinction that if you were to vote on this side, we essentially have a lot more control over which the younger self sees. Um, yeah. So I'm gonna go a little bit onto their case. And then I'll clean up a little bit just so my partner can have some fun. Sorry. So on the first contention, they say that they have more influence. Like, I feel like both sides have an incredible amount of influence. Like on our side, you can give advice that could like redo past decisions. It would help you so much. A lot of this is a wash. And then they said, oh, what if you go back in time and you change something and then you come back and then you realize none of it happened? Like, and then that's like that sudden feeling of realization. But I'm pretty sure this also happens in the op world, and it's actually worse because if you go into the future, you see something that you did really well, and maybe from misinterpretation or any of the other points, like the added stress, it just doesn't work out. All of a sudden, it's like a slow realization, like, oh crap, I'm not going to make it into Harvard, even though I should be. Like, what's wrong with me? So instead of a sudden moment of realization, like, oh crap, like when I travel back in time, I'm back here and nothing changed. It's a slow, stressful realization of like, oh, like I'm not good enough. Additionally, so you get this kind of same realization when you realize that you can't change anything or you're worse off, etc. Just in our world, as you go and as you grow up to be like the age that you will be, it's just a slow realization, and I feel like that's a lot more stressful and worse. Um, on the contention too, I know we didn't talk about this a lot in our first speech. I feel like a lot of our clashes did a lot of our points did kind of rebut it, but I'm just gonna make it clear on which one is which because I know there's a lot of washes in this debate. Um, like their contention two is about fulfillment and that you're gonna have knowledge about the world. Like we kind of agree that this wouldn't have that large of an impact. Like you can't change like world wars. We're talking about self-interest. So some of this falls outside the framework. Additionally, I feel like this is a little bit like non-unique. Um, yeah, like it's unique to experience both worlds, whether you're going into the future, you're seeing your life, or maybe you're getting new perspective on your past because when you're younger, maybe you don't understand everything. I just feel like fulfillment either is not that large of intention, and it's also not very like it's basically a wash. Okay, contention three on regret. This is also essentially a wash. We've talked about this a lot, kind of hinting at it, but just to directly respond to it, they said like everyone has like a desire to do something, to maybe to go back into the past, they have these regrets. But like for example, if like grandparents are like dead in like the current timeline, I would really want to go back and I would want to tell myself to spend my younger self to spend more time with them. And the fact is that we realize that that is like partially like non-unique. Maybe our side is a little bit stronger because it's like relating a little bit more to your life. You might get more immediate fulfillment. Um, but the fact is, like, this is not offense. Like on both sides, like you can go back or you're able to change like kind of like your timeline in terms of regret. So kind of in essence, like all of like many things in this debate are a wash. And I think at the end, we're the only ones with like clear like impacts, etc. But after this, my partner's gonna come up. Thank you guys. I strongly hope you guys vote opposition.
So I think that speaker for those eloquent remarks and call upon the leader of opposition to give a speech not to exceed 4 minutes and 30 seconds of grace, with the reminder, while new examples and new weighing is welcome, new arguments are not. All points of order will be taken under consideration independently by each member of the panel.
Okay, perfect. Awesome speech. Timer really quickly. Okay. Speak now if you're not ready. Otherwise, my time will start on my first word. Okay, hello again, judges. It's going to be a final opposition speech. So I just want to talk about, let's just go down the flow really quickly, right? Let's look at gov points, let's look at op points, and let's see what still stands and what is a wash. Since I think there's been a lot of clashes this round, a lot of things are pretty messy. So let's look at gov case. See, when they talk about influence, they tell you that, you're more likely to have control over their future. You're probably going to have more control over your future, and that, I don't know, you're going to have more influence of the future because you have little to no knowledge about the grand scheme of things or the past, so you're probably going to influence more. Again, we tell you this is pretty much a direct clash with points in our C4, how you're actually going to either have the same amount of influence but also better influence in our world because you can have controlled influence in our world. We tell you this warranting of how, like, okay, sure, he can have influence. We tell you that we can also have influence in our world, but even if he does have more influence in his world, our influence is ultimately going to be better in the past because it's controlled. We can control more likely what we do, what we want to get, what we intend, instead of on Gov's side, it kind of, he can't really plan what he does necessarily. I see C2 on fulfillment and also kind of C3 on regret. They're a bit similar in terms of what they're trying to get at here. They talked about how, like, you've already been in the past, like time traveling in the future would be more fulfilling because you can, like, it's a unique experience, right? You can see different things, you have a bigger picture. We again tell you this is kind of a wash, right? We think both sides are pretty unique, right? In one situation, you're like are in the one situation you're the only person from the future, and the other situation you're the only person that's from the past and in the future. Like, I think they're both pretty unique experiences. And I think as a like high school student, like my partner said, this fulfillment point doesn't really matter that much. You're a high school student, like you're not going to be thinking about the fulfillment of like going into the future when like you're a high school student. You're like probably 16, right? And like you probably care less about like the political like landscape of the world as a high school student than like I don't know these smaller term things, and probably more about your past than bigger pictures in the future. And then there's C3 about regret. Again, this is kind of similar, but we tell you this is kind of a wash, right? You're going to have regret on both sides that you didn't do the other option because they're so vastly different. Sure, Marty McFly went to the past before, but he's not going to his own past. Probably he's looking at different things. The past has so many different things to change. Just because you did something once doesn't mean it makes it like automatically such a like boring experience the next time. I can like visit Japan both 2 times and still be extremely excited both times. Like there is still more to do in both sides. We don't think that this regret point has that much impact overall. You're not going to regret not going into the future that much in your life. It's going to have minimal impact, if impact at all, and it's going to be on the same side. Now, looking at the op case, why you're going to be voting for op is because Gov side, we continuously warn that Gov side is the biggest issue here is that Gov has too much risk of having negative impacts, and Gov can't and hasn't really said much about that, while our C4 tells you why going to past is better. When you look through all of our contentions, a lot of our impacts, like burden of knowledge or loss of motivations, these directly impact the like, or I guess our or Marty McFly's future and our like current kind of state of mental health, right? We see like there's a lack of surprise and joy. There's a lack of like there's a lack of like happiness because you're always thinking of if you have a bad future, you're always going to be thinking about that bad future, or you're going to be doing bad or not informed like things to try to fix that bad future because you're a high school student, you probably want the best future for yourself, right? And we see that the most likely impact here is that you're going to have a worse future overall because you're trying to like meddle with something that you don't know the full context of. And if you don't meddle with it, if you don't try to do something, you're only going to be constantly thinking about it more and more and more. Again, most of our impacts here are worst future and worse mental health. And we think that we win here both um and this is why we win on both long term and short term, right? Because in the short term, you have worsened mental health. You're going to be thinking about this constantly, right? And it's overall just not going to be good for you in your high school life. But in the long term, the biggest impact here is that's going to impact your future negatively. And the risk here is too big. The probability of us having a worse future, the probability of us ruining our future is way too big, which is why you're always going to be voting on op case and not gov case because gov cannot tell you anything. And that's my time, and I urge you to vote an op ballot.
Awesome. I thank the speaker for those eloquent remarks and call upon the Prime Minister to close out the debate with a speech not to exceed 5 minutes and 30 seconds of grace. Here.
Okay, so the order of the speech is going to go some like responses to new arguments made in MO, some characterization, and then like ballots. My time starts in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, two big clarifications I want to make. MO says that you can be in the young person's perspective when you are traveling to the past. Not true, completely new, not part of framework at all, shouldn't be taken into consideration. Secondly, on this idea of like coping with grief, like I think like it's like blown out of proportion. Like what op does is says like, oh, like this burden of knowledge, like loss of motivation, these like emotions are just going to like completely ruin your life. But in reality, you're going to be there for a few days. So, and I literally analyzed in my first speech, right, that you can go to the future to make sure that when you go to the past, like when you go back to the present, you can make yourself most fulfilled as possible. Like, for example, they take this example of like coping with grief, like how it'd be like really hard to live without your grandparents. Well, when you go back, you'll have immense utility because you'll be like, wow, I still live in the present where I still have my grandparents that are there with me. I'd be infinitely happier because at least I know when they like died, I can spend the most amount of time with them as possible. And I also think this thing about like they kind of mischaracterize. They're like, oh, like you're gonna get a lot of pressure like when you get the things you want. But I think this is like not warranted well, and it's like you can just gut check this. Like when you get the things that you want, and all the analysis I give you about why we want to do good things or why we want to have like a meaningful life, you're going to be very, very happy when things go good. And when things are going wrong, you're going to at least try to change it. Okay. And then, so firstly, on control. So I think so the reason why this is a ballot is because the desire to have control is like if we're saying that this high schooler is like an irrational actor, right? Like they probably would love to have control over life because humans like to have like be able to control and influence over the things they care about. So they're much more likely to gain utility and gain happiness from going into the future to change things that they don't know and have control over things that they didn't have in the past, or going like, and I don't think that is a wash at all, because if you look towards the past, those are things that you already had control of, things that you already knew like the outcome of. Like you don't necessarily need to make amends with this like random friend. And even if like you'll just have immense regret, which I talk about later, if you just waste that opportunity. And then like the control that they have is the saying like, oh, like if you benefit the past, then maybe you can like you can get like benefits from that. But like take it compared to like we've emphasized the age of this high schooler for so long. You can influence, like they said, the like Marty McFly is like 16 years old. You can influence like 16 years of your life, like most of it being in like diapers, or like you can look to the future and like have an infinite life of things that you can control and things you can influence and things that you care about. And I think that this idea that like, oh, you will not care about the political landscape at all, I think like it is like intuitive. Like people are very people care about the political landscape, right? If you think that you're going to die because of climate change, because of all the information that we have about how like that is a very important thing, or like the political polarization, or like how like issues with the government, those are things that are going to influence your personal life and definitely are things that are going to be on your mind. Like existential dread is really well, and I think that ties really closely with mental health. And I think like regret and mental health are going to be like the biggest ballot you're going to be voting for the government, and here's why. Because what op impacts out to their like net loss on like is just like, oh, general like lack of motivation and like burden of knowledge and kind of being sad. Like, oh, I'm not as happy because I got into Harvard, but I knew that already. But in reality, what you'll get on like what you get if you don't propose is a bunch of regret of like, oh, what could have happened if I went into the future, saw that way earlier, and made changes from it? Oh, like what would have happened if I could have left a way bigger legacy and made myself so much happier if I had went to the future with more information, right? MO tells you something that I think is very true. They say, oh, like regret is kind of like on both sides of house. So if regret is on both sides of the house, this is like a really irrational actor who's like really worried about those things, then let's give this person more information and more control instead of letting the high schooler spiral, just thinking about what bad things can happen or regret when they like choose the past and be like, oh, what could have happened if I went into the future and chose that thing? So I think we're winning on probability and magnitude because the magnitude of the emotions of you going into the past, right? And maybe you're able to change something, but it's not gonna have a substantive impact on your life as compared to if you went to the future into like the unknown, something that has like a bigger like influence in your life, but also just on net because you have more information to work with. That's going to be much more impactful to you as a person. And the mental health impacts and the immense regret that you will feel like knowing that you could have spent more time with your grandma before she passed away, but you didn't do that. You went to the past to like make amends with a random friend. I think those two, like the comparative is pretty intuitive. So for all those reasons, I couldn't be prouder to propose.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those eloquent remarks, and thank you all for a fantastic round. Give us a few minutes and we'll come back once we have all independently submitted our ballots.
Okay, thank you guys so much. That was a great round. Thanks to
Thanks,
the judges.
guys.
Awesome round.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
I think all ballots are in, so if all the judges and debaters want to come back, we can just close. Zach, do you want to announce it?
Sure. Are all the bidders back? Yes. I forgot there were only three. First of all, congratulations again for everyone, for making it to the final round. This ended up being a 2-1 split decision, for the opposition. So congratulations, to the opposition, for winning, our camp tournament this year. Moses, you, voted Gov, so you can go first.
Yeah. All right. I was the squirrel, so I guess I'll start. First of all, this was a great round, a fantastic conclusion to a wonderful tournament. I guess I'll kind of get into my reason for decision. So this was a pretty this ended up being a pretty close round, and it was kind of a tricky round to evaluate because a lot of the points wash out. Either experience of going to the future or the past could like end up suck or could be really cool. You could regret doing either one, or you could regret not doing either one. If you travel to the future, you could learn what to do different with your life, whereas if you travel to the past, you could tell yourself what to do different. So there weren't a whole lot of impacts. It felt like standing at the end of the debate, or like clear votable impacts for both sides. But I kind of felt like there was one strong one for each team. So for side Gov, the impact you could essentially make a much bigger lifestyle change and give yourself a positive outcome if you know that in the future, like you want to change something about your life. And Alp tries to wash this by saying, "Oh, well, you can have the same experience if you go to the past and tell your past self to do something differently." But I think Gov's refutation to this is pretty clever, which is just that generally, like the things you might want to change about your life up until you turn 16 years old for the average high schooler probably aren't that massive. Whereas like the next decisions coming through your life are probably going to be much more important, probably much more impactful, and those are the ones you're going to want to have more information on so you can make a better decision to have a better outcome. Neg has this relatively strong argument that you could see something in the future that like really messes you up and your mental health could worsen, or you could obsess over the outcome you saw in the future. Um, and the way I kind of adjudicated the difference between these two arguments is I think ultimately the risk to your mental health is kind of outweighed by the opportunity to have the information to know whether or not you need to make a lifestyle change and improve your outcome. So both sides generally agree that you're going to have free will and have some capacity to change your future, or if you go in the past and tell your past self to do something, they have the opportunity to change their future, right? Um, and so if I like, let's say for example, I go into the future and I see that I'm like unemployed and depressed. Yeah, that would probably cause 16-year-old me to crash out, but it would also probably motivate me to start working harder and making changes that in the future I'm in a better situation. I am employed and happy. And that the impact of that is probably much greater than like my like little crash out in my room at 3 a.m. As a teenager. And then like if I see that I'm like doing super well and I'm happy and prosperous, I'll have renewed motivation to keep doing the things I'm doing because I know they will have positive outcomes for me, and I'll like have a positive mental health because I'll know like I have a good future in store for me, right? So on those grounds, I think ultimately I end up voting for side government. I just think this idea that you can sort of change your outcome in a much more meaningful way ends up being the argument that kind of convinced me the most out of all the ones that were left standing. But both sides did an incredible job. I had to think for a long time about my ballot. I was the last judge to submit. And thanks everyone.
Okay, I can go next. It's interesting. I actually did pretty much the same weighing as Moses in my decision, which was that the mental health, I split them up into like mental health impacts and like doing something about your life impacts. And I agree with Moses that the mental health impacts were both lower impact and probably a wash in many respects. So I was looking at the like ability to change your life. I also sort of agreed with this idea that there's probably less to change in a 16-year-old's past life than their future, though I wasn't quite as sure as Moses on this. There are things that happen in a 16-year-old's life. The thing that swings my vote is this argument from the op that you're just going to be better at changing your past, given that you have the context of what was going on. You've already tried one thing, you know what's happening. And in the future, you really don't have context for anything. You're there a couple of days, and you could just make a really bad decision. That's compounded by the fact you're a teenager. I think this is a pretty compelling argument, given that the future is going to look very different. And I think that the Gov response to this is a little scattered and doesn't address the main idea of this. So given that I think there's a similar ability to change your life in going to the past or the future, the whether you're going to actually do a good job swings my vote, and therefore I vote op. But it was a great round. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I had a very similar way of looking at the round as Jacob. I think that the PMR collapse on regret, I think, was largely unstrategic because, as both of the other judges have pointed out, I think that intuitively, this mental health argument is not weighed above things like, being able to change your life, especially when intuitively, like regret probably has a smaller impact on your mental health than a lot of the arguments that op went for about, for example, like, oh no, I went to like the like past instead of the future versus like, oh my gosh, this is happening in the future. You're probably going to spiral more about the latter than the former, and I don't think that there's any like particularly persuasive weighing as to like why you are more likely to do it. So I think that Gov is actually probably marginally losing the mental health clash, even with this collapse. And B, I think that the weighing of the mental health collapse over the changing your life collapse is probably also just very, very difficult weighing to make. And I don't think that it is sufficiently proven in the PMR. So then under this collapse, I actually think that there are two places to vote. I think that I think that you can probably vote on this like misinterpretation idea of like you go in and like you have a better understanding of the context of your past and like you kind of like get things out of context, which I think just uplayers every argument that comes from Gov, right? Because if you don't feel like you are doing it, you regret that you weren't able to spend more time there. Probably uplayers that to some extent as well. So I think that's probably the just like easiest place to vote. And then I also think that just like some of the control arguments in the fourth contention are also undercovered. That is to say that I think you probably do just have more control about what you can say or do, and that you are the one absorbing information in a world in which you've lived the past. So I think because of the control and context on the most important impact, which I think is the ability to actually, change your life or experiences in some meaningful way, I vote up. But wonderful round, everyone. And I hope all of the spectators learned something from three really awesome debaters.
Okay, thank you guys so much. That was a really hard motion. I had
Guys.
fun debating it. So
Yeah, thank you so much.
thank you.
Congrats, everyone.
Yeah.
Great job, guys.
Yeah, congrats, guys. That was a great round. Um, Thank you guys all for watching finals. It was a great round. I'm glad you guys got to see that. This is the end of camp, so thank you guys for staying through the very end. And yeah, you guys are welcome to leave.
Okay, thank you for camp. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you for Gan.
Bye.